Hello, and welcome to this edition of Secure Networks, the Endace Packet Forensic Files, with your host, Michael Morris. This episode's very special guest is Jack Chan, VP of Product and Field CTO for Asia Pacific at Fortinet. Jack, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Oh, great. I've spent quite some time in Fortinet. Actually, in my first decade in Fortinet, I look after, three regions in terms of pre-sales. And then now I'm privileged, to lead a few products within Fortinet under product management division. That's me.
Excellent. No, I've known you a while, as you know, and your expertise across the cybersecurity space is tremendous. So I'm super excited to have you as part of our series. Kind of where I want to start, Jack, is talking about NDR. RSA is coming up, and every solution vendor there pretty much mentions NDR.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get into, for our listeners, what are the key criteria that differentiate a great NDR solution from a basic one, especially for large enterprises, complex networks, and complex environments?
Yeah, now it's a great question to start off. It's quite funny. Like when NDR has been in the industry for like more than 10 years, and there's so many vendors claiming the NDR capabilities. So as a customer, I can often feel that they could be quite confused around the offering. So I think, for a good NDR solution, I think first we need to understand what is the solution based on. So it's based on collecting network metadata, right? And we're trying to do some detects or threat huntings within the network metadata. And NDR solutions, like if you talk about 10 years ago, it used to be quite a leading sort of solution because it's one of the solutions that uses like machine learning and AI to model that big sort of data. And as you know, data and knowledge is king, right? So we've got cases where enterprises uses NDR not just to detect attacks, but to threat hunt. Like just another case we had the other day was a enterprise client, telling me that they were hunting BitTorrent clients on the network, right? They were shutting down even SMTP servers that they weren't expecting to, send out emails on the network. Those we're not really up to the attack detection category yet, right? But they're using this more as a magnifying glass. So the ability for a good NDR vendor, the ability for the users to drill down on data, the investigation workflow, and often how often do they keep the data? Because some attacks can be prolonged on the network for quite a while now. For example, sunburst, right? You're looking at attack which is 6 months ago. So can your solution actually take back the data? What has this IP address done? What before and after the attack, even if it's detected by another security solution, what has IP address done before and after 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 6 months ago, so you can take it up. That will be some of the key differentiating criteria for the solution.
Oh, those are some excellent points, and you're spot on the dwell times, right? I think people tend to forget how often malware or threat actors are inside of infrastructure, and so I think that's an excellent point. So how should organizations balance the detection capabilities with response efficiency in an NDR solution? And are there trade-offs?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think detection capabilities, I think we have got in the cybersecurity world, we've probably got too many detection solutions out there. You think like a house, right? We've got a gate, we've got the CCTV cameras, we've got the dogs, etc. And in a typical, say, medium size up to a big enterprise, they will have what? IPS, they will have EDR, traditional EPP, network forensics, deception technology, NDR technology. They've got too many detection technologies. And I think the general SOC, right, whether it's outsourced or in-house, is almost flooded with alarms, right? So I think the big trend here is when you talk about response efficiency, let's talk about which events, when I come to my office as a SOC analyst, which events I should respond to first, right? Which are the false alarms, etc. So I think the solution which has the capability to summarize it to a like a human readable level, right? For example, we've got some integrations with NDR and EDR, and then go, oh, if NDR detects something, what does EDR say, right? If EDR detects something, then it's worthwhile to investigate that incident, pull that forensic evidence from Endace, for example, to investigate.
No, that's a good point, and the overlap of some of these detections can be confusing for many customers. So I'm going to hit a big one, right? Because the big buzz in the industry right now is AI. So how critical is the role of AI and machine learning in modern NDR solutions? And what
Mm.
should we look for in terms of these capabilities?
Yeah. And I think when 10 years ago, when people start to hear the term network traffic analysis, that was the former sort of term for NDR, right?
Yes.
And that's when the use of the machine learning models and AI, right? And now, 10 years later, the AI capacity, the compute, the algorithms are much more advanced that they can detect more things, right? I'll give you a very simple example. The recent white paper I wrote to publish some of our machine learning algorithms will state that, hey, Fortinet, we've been in the industry for a while. We know what's the bad URL, bad IPs. We keep track of a whole tons of them, right? And then we use machine learning models to determine, what does the time to live look like? What's the packet size looks like? What's the sleeping pattern looks like? Or the beaconing interview looks like for the bad traffic, right? So when a white hat hacker, the other banking case that we did a POC the other day, and the white hacker are clever. They don't use the traditional bad IPs. They will spin up something on Azure public network, but if our machine models, we don't know that IP or that URL is bad or not bad, right? Because we haven't classified it. But if the machine learning model fits for that traffic pattern, we will know that, this is actually similar to a Locky ransomware, so beaconing, right? So we can actually use machine learning model to determine that. That's just one example of how the machine learning sort of advances over the decade, and we can pick up more attacks, right? The other trend for AI and machine learning is the generative AI, right? Just like how you talk to Siri every day to do your tasks, right? I think a lot of vendors has move along to how to use the generative AI to interact with the solution. Because writing some of these queries to investigate the metadata could be quite difficult. The investigation, you need to be quite in-depth. You need to know exactly what you're looking for. That user agent string that Metasploit or some of the lateral movement tool uses, right? You got to be quite in-depth knowledge of that. So I think generative AI will solve or help us to solve some of that capacity, so that your SOC analyst doesn't need to be, hey, everyone needs to be senior, SQL experts nowadays, right? And then you can kind of lower that criteria.
No, those are some great examples of different angles of the AI leverage there. So what are some common challenges you see arise for customers when they're implementing an NDR solution alongside existing firewalls? Obviously, Fortinet being
Yep.
one of the leaders in the industry in firewalls. So what are some issues and challenges, and how can they be mitigated?
Yeah, I think in a typical enterprise deployment that we see, I think first of all, the nature of the solution, firewall's inline, right? You can block
Yeah.
stuff. But NDR solution is more like a non-intrusive, because you either use packet broker or span off a switch. So the solution nature is quite different. And we found, like, for example, we handle a lot of merger acquisition, like Fortinet has actually acquired a few companies. And the good way to sort of to see how clean or dirty that network usually for the other sister product company is that we just install NDR on it. We're not touching infrastructure. We're not like doing anything on your firewalls, and then instantly we can tell from NDR how clean or dirty that network is, right? So that's one way to implement the solution. But I think most enterprise will struggle is that we give you that big red button and say, when NDR detects something, do you want to press that and do this quarantine on the firewall, right? And most people will struggle. Should they do the automated remediation, or should they be manual? And that's where some of the solutions like SOAR comes in and go, okay, you might want it to automate to a certain point, and then there's still that human approval elements before you do remediation. But I think the big red button, as I described it, is still quite important, because if you think about some attacks like WannaCry, like a few years back, or quite a few years back, is that if you see things spreading quickly across the network, right, you want that big red button to stop it right away, and you'll be rather, hey, be safe than sorry type approach, right? Yeah. But it depends on the incident and whether you want to trigger that big red button.
No, that's an excellent point. I loved your example there of see how dirty or clean a network is. So that kind of hits on my next question, but maybe you can elaborate a little more detail. What are some unique network insights that an NDR should provide details in that a traditional firewall or a SIEM might not?
Yeah, I think definitely NDR is useful in deploying to detect more the east and west traffic. You know what I mean
Right.
by that is like, deep in the network. I mean, of course, everyone or in the firewall sense, we will say, hey, do this internal segmentation, firewall everywhere. But it does come with an operational cost that you need to manage all those firewall policies, right? But no one really logs anything on the switch level, right? That's where the sniffing on the spam port with the NDR solutions comes quite handy. Especially, I did a series on AD type attacks and lateral movements, right? So typically between your enterprise PCs and your domain controllers, there won't be a firewall, right? So you're looking at LDAP traffic, SMB traffic, and one of the attacks that the NDR can pick up is called DC sync, right? When a hacker, let's say a compromised PC, I want to sync with the DCs. Is a normal operation on the network, right? But just on a rogue IP that I'm trying to pull usernames and passwords on it. And once I get the credentials, right, then you can do anything with it. So NDR is very good at picking up those attacks, while a firewall and a SIEM almost cannot detect those type of attacks. Because on a firewall, you would just see it as an LDAP connection, SMB, or some RPC, which are legit, right? No one will really block that on the firewall, but the NDR can pick it up. And of course, like coupled with the forensic data that Endace offers, then you can, pull out what the user or that wrote the IP has been doing.
Right.
That's
an excellent example, right? Because I do think a lot of people don't think about the east-west traffic and all the threat activity that typically happens once a threat actor is inside the network. So one question we get a lot, and I'm sure you get it on occasion too, how do NDR solutions handle encrypted traffic without compromising privacy? And what are the implications for then detection accuracy?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, I mean, if you do look at some studies, a lot of the traffic are encrypted nowadays. So what do big enterprises do? I guess for the enterprises who are big enough and have the budget, they will install packet brokers who has the ability to not to affect any performance on the network, but ability to offload encrypted unencrypted traffic to the NDR solution. Then we can scan, right? Even some of our next-gen firewall, like a FortiGate or actually any top firewalls that you pick on the market, with the ability to do SSL inspection, but it comes with a performance cost, right, on the firewall. And then there are ways that NDRs can handle the traffic which is encrypted. The example I mentioned earlier, like command and control, we call it C2 modeling, those are encrypted. Hackers are not dumb. They will use HTTPS, SSL to encrypt their traffic upbound. So on a firewall, you just see this SSL out, right? But based on the machine learning and AI modeling, the stuff that I talked about before on the bad traffic, so we can predict that we actually don't need to decrypt the traffic. There's some traditional means of like JA3s or now moving to JA4s as well, looking at the hashes between the encrypted connections, and the world is like moving to JRN hashes as well. So there are different ways to do it without breaking that traffic.
No, that's a great point. And you've mentioned threat intelligence a number of times. That's kind of where I was going on my next one. So what role does real-time threat intelligence play in a successful NDR? And since you've already kind of highlighted some of that, are there more valuable sources of this threat intelligence?
Yeah, I think a simple example I hope the audience can understand is, let's take a NDR, will take a file hash, right? For the PDF file, for the Office file, then the traditional, I guess the basic threat intel is, I check this file hash with VirusTotal, and does it tell me that this is malicious, right? But this is just one source, right? So I think the ability for NDR to integrate with multiple sources of threat intel, but VirusTotal might tell you that, this file is clean or it's bad, but hey, the FortiGuard feed that Fortinet provides, or I don't know, where this Mandiant threat feed might tell you that this is bad. So I think enterprise often struggles when one threat intel tells you, hey, this is good, and one threat intel tells you, hey, this is bad. So what do you do with it? Do you take the safe and sorry approach, right? So the ability to prioritize the threat feed and which threat feed you use and trust is quite important. Because if you look at the threat research work across Fortinet, who's been doing it for 2 decades, other research vendors out there, there's some good stuff. And I think understanding what the vendor is good at It's quite important to decide which threat intel I should integrate with NDR.
Oh, that's an excellent point. Yeah, and they all are a little bit different for different things, right? So, speaking of the prioritization, how should an NDR solution prioritize and categorize alerts successfully to really avoid overwhelming security teams with false positives? As you know, too many alarms, too many false positives is a big hot button for any SOC organization. So, what's a good recommendation you have on that front?
Yeah, correct. I think with it's not just NDR. I mean, from my experience in industry, just talk about like malware intrusions. The more, let's say, put it this way, the more you push the detection percentage up, the more false positive that you will get, right? So it's a balancing act. Once you push up, close to 100% detection, but your FP rate is also rise to, I don't know, 1 to 5%, right? It depends on a scale. So it's easy for vendor to claim, oh, we have like 1% FP rate, but based on what? One sample or a million samples or 10 million samples? So don't trust those marketing figures, I would say. But here's the thing with detection versus FP. I think we do like a lot of POCs bake off with other vendors, right? Sometimes in a POC, I call it the Christmas tree. The analogy I use is some vendors will light up like a Christmas tree in a POC, and that's what get users so excited. But users, please do think when this solution is in your production environment, you have to deal with all those Christmas tree glares and lights, every day. So sometimes in a POC, our customers go, oh, for the NDR, you only like detect a few things on the GUI. But I go, well, that's kind of what you want. Every one of those attacks and alerts is the ones that you want to deal with, right? We don't want to flood you with 10 things or 100 things that you can't deal with in your work shift, right? In a SOC. So try to find a balance between that Christmas tree and the genuine alerts. Yeah. Our SaaS offering, because customers will resolve and close the case, etc. We actually process like trillions of alerts last year, and our FP rate is actually very low. The way that we can measure it is because we looked at the resolution comments from customer. Oh, this is true TP, and this is FP. So we can actually determine quite accurately what our FP is and try to improve on it. Because on the SaaS, once you improve the rules, detection, machine learning model for one customers, it benefits all.
I'm going to have to use that Christmas tree analogy. So just hope I'm going to share it with people as I continue my talks too. So that's a great analogy. How should buyers evaluate the scalability of various NDR solutions, right? Data rates are through the roof, depending on what part of the network. Even in core data centers, many of them are 100 gig now. Especially as network complexity grows and you start looking at things like IoT and multi-cloud hybrid infrastructures.
Yeah.
What's your advice on that front?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Actually, I think a more mature vendor will both have an on-prem offering and a SaaS offering, right? Customers will naturally know whether the data can go to the cloud or not, right? And remember, when we say data going to the cloud, it's not your PDF files or your Word files or sensitive emails. We just talk about the network metadata here, right? So scalability is a great question because the way, generally speaking, if you keep it on-prem, is always depending on the disks, the SSDs, the virtual machines, the compute you can throw at it, right? But there are some SaaS benefit based on cloud computing. When we talk about machine learning AI, cloud computing models are great. So you don't need to run a few GPUs, on the on-prem, right? But once you utilize the SaaS, let's say if you're okay sending all your network metadata to the SaaS, that's when you can benefit from the long retention. Like for our solution, you can actually store 1 year of data, right? And I would also recommend place the NDR on some strategic locations that your network might be weak, or where the attacks happens often, right? And then start with those, then you're getting your best ROI out of the solution. Because generally speaking, the more data you send to the cloud, right, the more it's going to cost the vendor to run the solution, right? And the more that they will charge you for it, right? So I think, when you're evaluating solution, just think of those parameters. Yeah.
No, those are some good points to customers to really look into. So looking forward, how Do you see the NDR space evolving in the coming years, right? We talked already about there's so many players in the industry, and I do see a lot of mergers and acquisitions potentially in play in that area. But what specifically do you see evolving, and what about the capabilities should customers look for coming?
Yeah, I mean, from my view, I mean, of course, I'm the PM for NDR, but I do have the bigger picture of the SecOps portfolio within Fortinet and other vendors, right? I think NDR will just become one of the functions. The foundation hasn't changed, right? Because NDR will collect the network metadata, like, and use that to determine attack and do that magnifying glass. I use that analogy, and also do the threat hunting, right? The SIEM and the SOAR and the big data lakes, they won't go away, right? Because they are still doing the job of correlation, etc. But NDR will definitely input to it. I think that's often of abuse words in the industry called XDR, with the extended detection. To me, really that is trying to correlate, the different attacks, like the analogy I had with house before, right? Hey, if my gate detected something, if my CCTV camera, if my dogs detected something, then it comes off with the situation. So that extended detection, I'll give you a quite simple example. If we see someone on NDR clicking on a C2, right? But how did that happen? Did it relate to a phishing email coming in the first place, right? So that will be detected in our FortiMail, right? And then did it come through the firewall? Did our firewall pick that C2 up, or the web filtering solution or picked it up, right? And then what does Endace say on the network forensic side, for this IP? So I think the industry will head to where machine learning and AI will be used, not just in the solution, but to summarize a whole lot of this data, so that the analysts don't need to do all this manual correlation between different technologies.
No, that's an excellent view of the broader picture, and bringing the different pieces of the portfolio together that almost everybody has now, especially larger environments. So Jack, my last question I always like to ask our expert guests like yourself, not so much just limited to NDR, but putting your prognosticator hat and looking forward over the next 6 to 18 months, which is a long time in cybersecurity. What's one thing you recommend to our listeners to really keep an eye on in the ever-shifting battle for cybersecurity?
Yeah, I would say I would try to step away from all these NDR, EDR, XDR technology. I would basically focus on the human. Quite funny enough, I'm helping one of my other PMs to do a human-centric sort of security presentation, because everything starts with the human, the clicking on the links, right? The unconsciousness of not patching, or I'm too busy, I missed that, and that's why the attack happened, So everything starts with the human, I think that's one thing. I think the other aspects I would touch on here is shifting left. I never really talked about it with SecOps, but a lot of applications that we are trying to protect starts with coding, right? So we cannot live without touching applications on an iPhone, on an Android, or on a corporate nowadays. So who code these applications? There are products out there like, DevSec type products that will look at the SAS and the DAS scanning. So start fixing at the source. Don't fix it, or don't install IPS because I've got a vulnerability in my web app, or once I've done it, right? But try to shift left and fix it at the source, right? Whether you host it on the cloud or CSPM solution, or host it internally. So I think that security, don't rely on the end tools to protect and detect, right? But trying to fix it at the source and at a human level is actually quite important.
Oh, those are excellent
points. So it
points.
might be quite a tangent answer, but
No, I haven't heard anybody mention the human level, but I remember, gosh, it's been probably 15 years. I was at an AT&T cybersecurity conference actually, and the big push was the human factor, right? That was the thing. Security is everybody's issue, because if you don't follow procedures, best practices, click on the wrong thing, you can be that vulnerability point, right?
Yeah, I think it's across the whole industry. Sorry. Any big enterprise who develop their own applications, any vendors like Endace and Fortinet, we hire developers, right? The secure mindset, secure coding, peer checks, and all the SAS and that stuff. I think that's quite important.
No, absolutely. Well, Jack, thank you for taking time out of your really busy day to join us and share your tremendous insights in how to better secure networks. We'd ask our listeners to tune in next time for another edition of the Endace Packet Forensic Files. For more information about Endace's network packet capture platform and our integrations with Fortinet and our other Fusion technology partners, please go to endace.com. Jack, thank you for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Loved all your insights.
Thank you. Pleasure's mine.